Excuse me, I've just got to go pick up a whole bunch of fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to a special Friday edition of the Fragments of Silicon European interviews. Joining us this week is, forgive me if I mispronounce this. Foreign names is not our forte. We've learned this through long, hard experience. But this week we are welcoming Gabor Szutorisz of Lost Pilgrims Studio.
Hey. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me.
No problem. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well, thank you. It's a Friday. We are closing to end the day, so it's all good. And we are having this talk, which is something quite exciting for us as well.
Is this your first interview about? Is the game pronounced Vargas?
Yeah, it's Vargas, and it's our first Twitch interview, so our live interview. So we gave a couple video interviews before, but those were pre-recorded, edited, and then went out. So it's a first.
Duly noted. Yeah, we're all live. It's like, which is a blessing and a curse. But anyway, so how we like to start the interview is by getting to know the person, people behind the studio, the game, and whatnot. And we like to start there by asking, what got you interested in video games on both a personal and professional level?
So let me start with the personal one. So I've been playing tabletop RPG with my friends for like more than 2 decades. And that was basically the seed that eventually led me to this path. But in my professional capacity, I was going on a corporate career path and did not really think of becoming an indie dev until just 2 years ago, when I convinced my buddy, who was the dungeon master in our tabletop group, to how about we just quit our corporate jobs and start a studio and just develop a game. And he bid on it. So in a couple of months, after planning what we could do and whether it was truly worth it and could work, we decided, yeah, let's do it. Took a leap of faith and just jumped into it. So that's how we really started. It's not a traditional, I don't know, it's either slowly bit by bit getting into it or starting right away. It was really late, so we are closer to now 40. And so it was quite late when we realized we wanted to do more than just a corporate something, and instead let's live for something we truly enjoy. And since it's an RPG, it was really realizing all those campaigns, playthroughs into a game, which is quite exciting. You're sharing it with the whole world.
Right. So let's see. I think the first question I have is, what kind of RPGs did you play in the tabletops? Was it just D&D? Did you play other pen and paper games?
So we played a few Hungarian ones that I'm not going to mention. That was really early on, but soon we switched to AD&D and then D&D editions, mainly as a rule book. So we were playing on our own homebrew dark fantasy setting, which is the Riven Realms, what the game is set in. But we also played like Planescape Torment setting, Dark Sun a bit, Earthbound. We played also other genres like we played a lot of Star Wars and Shadowrun, and a couple more we dipped into. those were the main ones.
Okay. Galix, I'll turn over. Do you have any questions about the tabletop stuff? Since this is kind of your area of expertise.
Not mostly. I'm not super familiar with most of those settings, although it sounds interesting. I've heard of Dark Sun at least.
Yeah, so that's an official D&D one. So yeah, we always used D&D 3.5. I don't know, ever since it came in, and we added a lot of homebrew house rules, really, and we've been quite happy with that, so we kept it.
Right. I think before we continue, we should play the trailer of the game so people can get an idea of what Vargris is.
Okay.
Its full title is actually Vargris: The Riven Realms. And we'll pick that apart in a bit, but as soon as my colleague gives the green light here.
Okay. Here we go.
The River Realms, they call it. What a fine poetic name for something as rotten and twisted as our land has become. Terrible beings entered through the cracks in the tapestry of reality, arose to rule over the natives. And the River Realms, now godless and vengeful, reincarnated from the ashes. Many ventures specialize in transferring cargo and passengers over bleak and deadly leagues of land. Others try to take everything of value from said travelers. And you are a Vargris too, are you not? Daring and savvy, always looking for an opportunity. My tale is of a Vargris such as yourself, but one whose fate was cursed and wrought with ill fortune.
As you can see, it's a strategy role-playing game affair. Now, exactly what is a Vargris in the terms of the world here?
So a Vargris is the leader of a comitatus. So it's a traveling company. It's the leader of. It could be, depending on the player's choice, more towards a mercenary company kind of company, or could be more about trading and exploration. So the game will offer all of those elements, and the player can choose how to play it. So that is the person that is really the leader and setting the course, where we are going, what we are doing.
Oh, that's certainly an interesting conceit. Honestly, I don't think I've ever encountered a computer role-playing game that allowed you to basically play as a caravan leader.
Yeah, it's a bit different. So, like, you have Banner Saga, but you as the player, you are not represented, right? So you have all those characters in the game, which is, by the way, a brilliant game. So, but you yourself is you're non-existent. You're just managing those characters as the player, but you're not in the game itself.
Okay, yeah, that I've seen that in other RPGs. You're the godly or omniscient leader type that it's like, honestly kind of reminds me of a Sin game, like Sim City. You're the nameless mayor kind of deal.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's see. So what's it like transitioning from like pen and paper RPGs to making a computer role-playing game here?
It has its challenges and obviously a lot of good things. So the whole thing why we stepped on this journey was that we already have a world that is built with characters, history, culture. All of that is there in our heads, right? So it's a big advantage. You're not starting off from trying to come up with a consistent word, but it already exists. So that's a good thing. Uh, on the other hand, you are like, you have so many things that you need to narrow down, like, okay, what are we including? How can we convey that to the players? Because they haven't spent 2 decades playing on this word, so you need to introduce them to it. So
Hmm.
that's a bit of a challenge.
It
Other than
sounds like
that,
I suppose
yeah, go
there are
ahead.
both conveniences and challenges to being able to do number crunching with the computer
Yeah.
instead of manually.
Yeah, yeah. It's also like we in the game itself, we are not using D&D as the system, since I don't know even how it would work from a copyright perspective, but also because that's quite complex. So not everyone wants that complexity. So it's more about the D100 typical roles, so more closer to the likes of, I don't know, Mortem, City of the Damned, or Darkest Dungeon, and those games that are closer to this, or on the strategy side and narrative side, like Sunless Sea. So just classic roles, 1 to 100, and if you reached the certain threshold, you got it. If you are above that, then you're out, then you failed at that. So we try to have a simplified system that is easily we can easily convey to the players.
oh, sir, that certainly sounds like a challenge.
Yeah,
Let's
so
see.
that transition is like, okay, we had these monsters and so on figured out in D&D system. Now we need to just plug them into a different system. But since our dungeon master Gary, who's my co-founding partner, like I said, he he's been doing this really the dungeon master part and coming up with campaigns for really more than 2 decades. And it's not the hardest challenge in the whole development process.
Hmm. Well, are you using a D20 based system, or did you come up with something wholly original for your game year?
Sounds like they said flat D100, which is could be fairly similar to a D20 system, but I mean more of the differences are going to be in like stat builds and stuff than in the
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
die
We
used
use
rules.
that mostly, and then just a few attributes are working differently, like initiative roles and a few others like working with D6 or other. But it's like for the most part it's D100.
Hmm. Uh, not
Which, for
overly.
those who are unfamiliar with role playing games, is a thing, and you usually do it by rolling two 10-sided dice, one for the tens and one for the ones.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like I'm familiar. I'm much more familiar with D20 than D100. I don't think I ever played a D100 game.
But it's still
Like,
like a flat scale. It's not like a dice pool
right.
system or any of the
Right.
weirder things.
Which makes sense, given the circumstances here.
Yeah, we felt like there's just so many other elements to the game in terms of strategy, combat, and so on. So it's already complicated enough not to make that even more complicated with a dice system. So we figured, okay, what is the system that we could use for also like the event tests when there are chance on events on what's happening, using your perks and so on, versus also working in the combat system. And that's how we came together. Okay, that's the easiest that could work all those places.
Hmm. And in terms outside the dice system, um, were there any other complications transposing this campaign setting, all this lore, all this world building from D&D into this original setting?
Yeah, so from a narrative perspective, since the history and everything is already set, We wanted to find a time period in the world that was not that much determined, so it leaves us more space because we didn't want to just screw up continuity, right? So we had all those playthroughs campaigns. We wanted those to stand, and so we chose a period between those campaigns that the players will be playing on, and that helps as well. Like, okay, we are developing that part now, but there are characters who were either we were playing with or uh, their dads, granddads, and so on. So like have all those connections. So that's the narrative part. And on the technical side, we had the challenge of like, okay, we wanted to have this choose your own adventure kind of narrative. You are presented with a situation, and then you have different choices, and those have dependencies, those have modifiers of what's the chance of choosing that will succeed or not, whether you can bribe someone or not. That will dependent on your charisma and charm and so on. And so how to have that built in, right? So we have to develop a completely new tool for that. There are other tools out there that could be uh, plugged into Unity. We are using Unity
Mhm.
as I mentioned, but those were not seamless and those were not specific enough for our needs. So we built a bespoke system for that automatically synchronizes with our servers and then uh, gets imported to Unity. And that building that took a lot of time, but that now allows us to create content without any really coder intervention anymore. So like the writers and script, they just script all of that included in the system, and then we can just import that.
So, in essence, the story is kind of procedurally generated based upon the choices made by the player.
Well, it's like you have a grid or yeah, a grid of or like spreading out. Okay, you have one situation, you have three choices. Depending on which one you choose, that leads to a different step in the event, and there are again choices. Some of them eventually return to one common ending. Others are completely different. Sometimes these events, whatever you choose at one in one event will have an effect on somewhere else later on. You did something good or bad, and people will remember that. Or you could even have bigger impact, like depending on your choices through a number of events. Maybe there's a settlement that is burned down, and there is no more settlement there anymore on the campaign map. Or maybe you chose to side with them, help them, and it's even more prosperous. So like you get discounts there and so on. So like it spreads out. It's not generated in the sense of nothing like procedurally generated, but like there is a big web of options that you can explore and choose different things. And even in one playthrough, you are not able to choose all the options. So you could replay it and play differently.
Yeah, that makes sense given what I've seen. Like, this seems like a very big and robust role playing experience, which could be cut short pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Darkest Dungeon earlier, and seeing the combat system that really reminded me of that game.
The aesthetic is reasonably similar too.
Yeah. Also, things like the actual actions, that remind me of Darkest Dungeon. It's like, but anyway, influence aside,
Yeah.
how does the combat work in Vargas here?
Yeah, so in Valorous you have 6 versus 6 on the enemy field, and that's a classic JRPG version. And indeed, the animation part where we bring them closer and have the action happen like that, that's quite like Darkest Dungeon. But other than that, it's a different positioning system, and we also chose the art style to be more so close to realistic, so less like cartoonish, but more like really realistic, to more reflect the dark fantasy world that we are trying to build here, right? Um, so you can have more than six characters, six companions, as we call them in the game, but you can only deploy six of them.
Hmm.
And then there are enemy types that take up more than one unit space. So there could be double, and maybe at the really end of the game, we will have those that occupy four spaces. We'll see. We don't have any enemy like that just yet. So, and then you have rules about like melee skills can only be used from the front row. Some skills are restricted that can be only used from back row. You have coverage, so you cannot attack anyone on the screen. But if someone stands before them, then you need to hit the first guy first. Except if you have like a range skill, you can target the back row, but probably with a minus penalty because you are less likely to hit that target in cover and things like that. And you can there are a lot of skills that involve movement plus some action.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's you hit and then move, or sometimes move and then hit, and you can play with that. And there are other elements like there's evade. There's you can choose whether you block or evade the attacks that are coming your way. And so the difference is in this case that with block you stay in your position, but you can shield yourself and absorb part of the damage. Whereas in case of evade, you jump out of that attack and avoid the complete damage, but you are moved to a different space. So that changes your position at random. So you will need to make up for that. And that pros and cons and things like that.
If an enemy takes up two spaces, is it going to be front and back, or is it going to be two side by side?
That's front and back.
Okay. Because I was
So
thinking, like, if
yeah,
it was a horse, it would probably be like front and back. But if it could be like some kind of giant enemy crab, and then it could just be wide.
yeah, it's more the first one, so it's front and back. That's what we have so far.
Hmm. And in terms of the companions, are they going to be like just character classes? Like you know, you have a monk or a magic user, or a fighter, that kind of thing, or are they actual characters?
They are actual characters, so they have their full-fledged story, background. They have
Hmm.
their own goals. They have their own storylines, and if you help them through them, that's the only way to progress them. So obviously you can level them up, but if you are not, you need to progress their story as well, parallel. Otherwise, they just get stuck after a while. So and they have like their personality. So if you are playing really cruel, and then there are just soft-hearted characters in your companion crew, they may even leave you for those atrocities, or the other way around. If you are just being too altruistic, some characters who are more really uh, two 2 feet on the ground and just wants to survive, and it's a harsh word, then they may leave you for that.
Hmm.
Hmm. Which
And
is
is there like
fairly standard to have, like, more or less, like, your companions might not agree with your alignment and might have issues with that in
Yeah,
more
yeah,
classic
yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons terms.
yep.
and along the lines of the party, is there any sort of party interplay with like the temperaments and stuff? Like, if you've got a evil wizard and a holy paladin, for example, would they clash?
Yeah, they would. So even to the point of you could not have them both on the party, and you will need to pick
Mhm.
because you need to side with either of them, or even just outright conflict between them, and you need to really switch or pick a side and then have a combat. Uh,
Huh.
yeah, so there will be instances of that. Obviously, most of the uh, companions can fit together, but not all of them. So there are pairs or different versions that cannot stand each other at all. Some you can make do like, or maybe just temporary, but you can convince them that it's okay to work together. But others are just not possible to have them both at the same time.
I have a
Okay.
slightly non sequitur question, which is looking at this footage. The overworld map with everything being broken up into pretty much triangles is pretty interesting. Was that something you came up with, or was that based on something? And how does it how does that work? A lot of the time, overworld stuff is based on hexes, which is this is a little bit similar to with another like degree smaller,
Yeah,
but
yeah. So it's actually like we wanted to have a turn-based game. So that was the first step. Okay, so how do we do that? We should have like spaces to move on. And then we thought of like heroes Heroes of Might and Magic, when you just click and there are sort of the center you mark and then you go there. It's not a node grid, but we felt like, okay, this is about going on certain paths, right? So it's the most of the world is inhabitable and really hard to cross. So there are only that, and so it's about those paths and how we control. And that's why we just came up with, okay, let's have a grid, and it's triangles for some part, but not everywhere. So where it's like easy to go in almost any direction, that's where you see the triangles. But
hmm.
in other places, there are like longer node distances between nodes, and there are like different uh, grids that are reflective of what's the area like. So like it's a mountain in between. There's just no line crossing that. Only if there's like some place, a tunnel or something that leads through.
Yeah, it looked like mostly triangles, but then there are some areas where there is a node that you can't go across one way or another.
Yeah. And there will be like hidden nodes as well that only get you can only access if you have met certain conditions, or you have companions who have like navigation skills and so on. So there will be those.
Like you can't go across the mountain. You might be able to go across a mountain that you couldn't normally if you have someone who's good at mountaineering or something.
Yeah, exactly. So those, or you just got knowledge of a secret path, right? So
Mhm.
and then from that point on, you can use that path, or you have no way to know how to go to a really dangerous location, like I don't know, a more swamp. But
Mhm.
if you get that knowledge, okay, this is the secret way, then you can do that, and maybe someone with really expertise in the area could reveal it as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, on the inverse, are there any dungeon areas?
Yeah, there are some, but that's not visible on the campaign map itself. But when you get to a location that includes a dungeon where you go down for whatever reason, that's presented through the events. You've seen in the demos, the
Right.
video footage, the narrative is how it's presented, and sometimes the narrative brings you, okay, you went down underground, this and that happened, and sometimes conflict happens there. So in that case, you would see a combat background depicting a cavern or cove or whatever, wherever you are.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Um, Especially since programming in a whole third set would be that much more complicated. Right. Um, anyway, shifting a bit, how does the trading system work?
That's actually something we are now working on. So far, the trading part has been just flat numbers, base prices, and that was about it. So what we are now developing, actually, that was on our FIG campaign, I believe the fourth milestone. We got funded. Uh, that's now a more complex design where you would what we have as game design, you have locations that are sort of the sources of those materials. Like in one area, they mine obsidian or marble or whatever, and then they bring it. So that location will be a source, and the material will be much cheaper there. And then as it flows through to distant locations, it gets obviously more pricey. So we have a system based on like the distance, how it goes, and how much those different areas are getting supplied from different sources that calculate the prices of those. But we are adding also like a time shift in them. So this is really our end goal, and hopefully we can get there. Is like you get a rumor about a slave uprising in a mine, you would know that means there will be less supply, so prices will go up, and you can make your arrangements accordingly. You might want to buy some stuff immediately if you got this rumor in time, because you will see that in a maybe couple days, couple weeks time, as that rumor is widespread, prices go up, and you could sell that on a profit
Hmm.
and things like that. So that's the goal.
Makes sense. Like,
You
and
can have a is it going to take into account stuff like, oops, you flooded the market with such and such a thing, and now that's not worth much?
Well, not that much. So you as the Vulgris obviously are a factor in the whole economy, but you're a small part of it. So like maybe in like so really small encampments, you can influence like okay, what's the situation there. But in bigger cities, your stock doesn't really matter. You have a fixed cargo space that depends on like how many beasts of burdens you have, how many workers and slaves and so on you have, how much they can basically carry with them, and so that's your total size that you can pick up and buy.
So you're literally mechanically incapable of, oops, I accidentally sold like 5,000 lots of mithril, and now no one needs mithril.
Yeah, so that's not possible. We didn't want to like go and make it into a trading simulator. So
Hmm.
like we restrict the player to act as a really a caravan leader who has means to influence just to that extent.
I suppose along those lines, is stuff like the weather or terrain going to be an encumbrance towards the goods you're carrying?
Yeah, so terrain already is. So between each of those nodes on those lines, there is a terrain attribute that really influences how many movement points you need to spend to get from A to B. So depending on the terrain, maybe it's the same distance, but it actually takes much more time to get through, and that's how it influences travel. So you can choose to go and use the roads, which are obviously going to be much easier to travel, so you can get much further there. But likely there will be more authority, tax person, and so on will show up. Uh, or you can decide to, okay, let's go on the shadow road, go through the wastelands, but that's gonna cost you more because you will spend more time trying to get through those, and obviously more dangerous as well.
Hmm. And in terms of narrative, is it just like a series of individual events, or is there an overarching story going on here?
Uh, Many independent events, and many that are interconnected, and there are some that we could say like overarching stories, but like not one single story arc. But there will be ones that lead you to and lead you through many places that to be able to piece together, you will need to visit a lot of locations and so on. But they are not like a main story as in classic RPGs where you need to, that's like a main quest and side quest. So There's not like that. You can go on and play and choose to ignore them.
Hmm. Now, I guess my question to follow up on that is, how does the game end if it does, or can you just like take missions, indefinitely?
So right at the start, when you will create your own progress, you will be required to pick one goal that is sort of like your winning condition. So, which could be as easy as you want to be that wealthy that you start your own trading house, or things like you want to be so knowledgeable about the lore of the land that you want to collect all the codex entries. The codex is a functionality that is like really the lore book of the whole setting, and you can keep gathering entries in it. So you want to be knowledgeable, or you want to be famous or infamous, and you gather renown. And if you meet a certain point, then you become that level of really acknowledged across the continent, and then that's your winning condition. But even after achieving any of these, you would be able to continue on, maybe even pick a second objective if you wanted to, or you can just retire that character and say, okay, let's restart with a different uh, goal and different values, and I want to play it differently.
I see. And is there a limited amount of time to complete any of these goals?
Well, we do have a sort of end to it. We are planning to have in-game 10 years. We are giving the players 10 years to play. Uh, we'll see how much time that means in actual gameplay. We haven't tested yet, but that's because that's the period we chose. Like nothing major, no major events are in the history for that time.
Hmm.
But other than that, we are not limiting the player really.
I see. And shifting a bit, what about the magic system? How does that work?
So the whole continent was devastated by an arcane cataclysm. Then gods came down and destroyed most of the, the territories. And so magic is wild. There are some places that are inhabitable because of that. There are races that are like magically active by nature, like dragonkins, demonkins, and so on. And there are others who learn magic in like school or through tradition, like shamans and so on. So there is really magic is all around. It's powerful, so that's how it is. There are many magic items, gear, and so on. Magic anomalies that prevent you from going to this place or that place, and you would need to have different kind of equipment to be able to shield yourself against those things like that.
That sounds interesting. And in terms of like actually casting the magic, do you have to like gather ingredients? Do you have to like memorize from a spell book?
So when it's a companion who's using it in combat, then it's just about you have the resource we call power, and that's both characters who are magically active and non-active have power, but just use it differently. Obviously, magically active ones will cast spells from it, whereas a knight will just use it as power as brute force for their bigger attacks, right? So that is just one resource, and they can use up until they run out of power. For the narrative part, it's different. So sometimes you need equipment. There are often dependency. Having a caster, having a spell weaver within your comitatus could be a dependency or a huge bonus to do stuff. Some equipment can only be used. So it's presented through choices. they open up new choices that become available if you have casters, and then the narrative will describe like what they are channeling their energy and how they are influencing the story.
Sounds interesting. And does clerical magic work differently?
So that's an interesting one actually, because uh, as the story goes, so the gods came down and destroyed the whole continent, and then they left. So clerical magic, for the most part, does not exist, except for the three new gods that came into uh, this realm. They're evil sort of gods, and then they have clerics. They have their sort of paladins. Uh, but other than that, other gods are not non-existent.
Hmm. And let me see. Shifting even more to away from the game and into the developments. Um, where is the game in terms of content and all that at this point in time?
So we do have available for the players an independent short story we are calling The Pilgrims of the Wasteland, and that's about 8 to 12 hours of content. It is a set path, so you're sitting across from an old man at a campfire, and he's telling a story, and you're playing through that. It's about uh, another virus that was involved in those events, and you're playing through that. It has a more narrow, overarching story. And then once you finish that, you will be able to create your own virus and start your own story. That's how we designed it. And that's basically this first part also serves as the tutorial. It also introduces you to the world, the setting itself, and hence it's more structured in a way. But it opens up gradually. So after a while, you have just like the grid system, you can free roam, but you still need to uh, complete some main objectives. So that's what's available already, and we are already parallel working on the main game, as we call it, for the open world part, which is uh, I wouldn't just give you exactly a date, but we're getting close. So we are now assessing like how we could speed up and maybe uh, publish it in still this summer. We'll see to our feedbackers. So we have this open access way of publishing our builds. So whoever pledges on Fig immediately gets access to our alpha and keep getting these patches, and which are either features or this content patches will be included as well.
Hmm. And what is Fig Open Access exactly? I'm I think this is the first game we've ever covered that's using this particular feature.
And actually, we are the very first game that uses this feature. So Fig started this only earlier this year, and we were the first campaign that went live with it. And it's a really interesting mix between an early access and a traditional crowdfunding campaign. So you would have all the tiers, pledge tiers, with the different kinds of bundles, rewards included in them, from ranging from the basic, you get the game, to like more advanced ones, you get the music, additional stuff, and so on, to the point of you can get and design your own character, or get your picture in the game, right? So all these different tiers that you would have it in any crowdfunding campaign, but you also by default get the game, just like in an early access. You would get access to the game, you install it, you can play it, and you get all the patches. And what's also different in open access, that it doesn't have an end date. So like Kickstarter would have the 30 days, right? And after that, you need to reach your goal. And if you reached it, happiness. If not, then you failed and you didn't get any of the money, right? In
Hmm.
case of open access, there is just no limitation. You run this campaign up until you release the game. And so you keep gathering to not a single goal, but like the series of milestones, really just the development milestones you would have. So in our case, like, okay, we are adding a new feature, scouting. That's going to cost us $7,000 to develop. Okay, let's add that. And then we have crew combat. We are going to produce new art. We are adding a new territory. We are going to open up, and we keep adding these and keep gathering money for these, right?
Hmm. It sounds like early access combined with Patreon, from my vantage point.
A bit, but with Patreon, you would have a monthly due payment, right? So you
Right.
wouldn't pay it upfront, but you have a subscription. In
Hmm.
this case, you pay that upfront. So I don't know. So our lowest tier is $28. You buy the game, you get the game immediately, and you get all the further patches for free, just like in early access.
Sounds like an interesting system.
Yeah, it really is. So first we heard about the plans from our fit contact. We were like, oh, what? And then we thought about it. Okay, this could really work because we wanted to bring this game to our players. We would want to go early access, but like on Steam, it's quite risky. People just treat games as if they were final. You would get reviews like, "Oh, this game is not finished yet," and despite it being clearly shown that it's early access, right? And if you get into a bad review status, it's hard to come back from it. So we wouldn't want to risk that. But Fig allows us to sort of do early access, but in a more controlled and safe environment. So we quite liked the idea, and that's why we jumped on board.
I see. And is this game being developed for Windows only, or is it Mac and Linux as well?
All three. So we already have builds for all three, and we are planning to continue to support all those platforms.
Hmm. And have you been approached by Epic about this Vargas game?
No, we haven't been. We are not planning to go exclusive on any platform.
Mm.
Obviously, we will see, and we are not sort of like committing to that, but we do not see any reason to go to do that.
Fair enough point. There have been others who have taken that stance, and sometime later, it's like,
Yeah, so we saw that the biggest backslash that could come is when you commit to like, oh, we are never going exclusive, and they do. That's the worst mistake you can do. So we say that we are not committing to not going ever exclusive because that's just a safer. Even though it's like not, we do hear that some people doesn't like, just don't like that, and we can completely accept and agree with like, okay, they have their personal preferences, and that's fair, but we just don't want to risk that, right? But other than
I
that, so I we see like minimal chance of that happening. What we experience, or at least what I've seen, is that companies that did go were mostly with publishers, right? And that sometimes they were not that much involved in the decision. We don't have a publisher either, by the way. And
so you're self-publishing.
yep, that's the plan.
Hmm. And are you just targeting the PC platform, or not necessarily right now, but like after the game is finished? Are you looking into maybe having this game ported to mobile devices?
Well, we do plan to release eventually, right after we finish for PC, on Nintendo Switch and
Hmm.
probably tablets, so like iOS and maybe Android as well, tablets. We do believe for just normal mobile phones that would be just too much reading and too small screen to run the game. but we are considering to maybe have different versions of those games. So like I could totally imagine having a dungeon crawler version just for mobile, or uh, just simplified versions of the narrative part, right? So not in the same form, but we will be eventually targeting mobile, I think.
I see. And have you locked in a price for Vargas yet, or is that still something up in the air? Early backer stuff excluded, of course.
So we haven't logged it. We are keeping an eye on like similar games, how they price themselves. But since our release is probably a year from now, we will see how it goes around that time. So, yep.
Okay. It's important to be flexible at this stage, probably.
Yeah. So, like, if committing to something and then again changing our approach, that would be a bigger mistake. Either underpriced or overpriced. We are saying something and then changing. That's not a good strategy. Not a good.
I'm like, I suppose so. Like, variable pricing is a feature of like actual early access games, but given your unique circumstances, it's probably for the best.
Yep.
Like, anyway, Galix, do you have any final questions here?
Oh, sorry, I had my mic muted. Derp. I got most of my questions out over the course of the thing, but I guess looking at your possible companions, you have pretty definitely don't all look human. So I was curious if there's anything mechanically different about the different species or races or whatever, and if that stuff is
Yeah.
mostly from a D&D thing, or if there's a lot of original stuff in there, or what.
Yeah. So there are races that you could recognize from other settings as well. So like Dragon King and Demon Kings that are pretty much what they would call in D&D were tieflings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are orcs, dwarves, and so on. There are other stuff that like we have a disease that is affecting most of the continent, a medical disease that's called the taint, which is a random mutation close by it. Many of the infected just die outright in the process as they are mutating. Others just survive. Many of them like nothing like advantage, no advantage comes of it, but some are, and they are the more wide-looking companions you can see,
That guy with the
who
bug
have some
arm.
special mechanics or special skills and special attributes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also,
All
I
right
saw one of the
then.
guys fighting with a gun. So is the technology level here a little higher than usual D&D stuff?
Yeah. So how you could imagine this world is like imagine from our history the Roman Empire magically infused. So there are clerics, mages, and so on, advancing even a bit like Byzance and so on, and then get shattered by the cataclysm. So that was where it all gone wrong, and really pockets of the territories kept some of that technology, like the dwarves kept some of that, and so on.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's all.
All right. Yeah, we got to wrap up here. So, um, Gabor, it was wonderful having you on the program to talk about Vargas here. I'm
Thanks
looking
for
forward.
inviting.
No problem. No problem. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to review the game when it, becomes content complete and all that stuff. But in the meantime, the game is Vargas, the Riven Realms. It's currently available for support on Fig. go to www.fig.co/campaign/Vargris the Riven Realms, and be sure to back it today. All right.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
No problem. No problem. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in for our Sunday review show. And until then, I wish you good gaming.